Hi, everybody. Welcome to Talks at Google. My name is Judy, and I am so excited for today's talk with Tegan and Sara. Over the course of their career, Tegan and Sara have released 9 studio albums. They are outspoken advocates for the LGBTQ community, and in 2016, they established the Tegan and Sara Foundation to fight for equality and gender justice. They can now add authors to their list of achievements, and today they're here with us to talk about their memoir, High School. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Sara Quinn and Tegan Quinn. And now I'll kick it over to my colleague, Josh, who will take it away.
I love being referred to as a colleague. Thank you, Judy. That's awesome. Sara, Tegan, welcome. It is great to have you.
Thank you for having us.
Oh my gosh, don't thank me. I'm doing nothing. I'm really nothing at all. I spent
We
the past
love having things to do, so I have to say thank you because it's just
Oh my gosh.
flow every day to wake up for something like it's like, oh my God, we have a Google Talk today. It was very exciting.
I'm so excited. I was reading this. I absolutely love it. I have been a fan of yours for a very long time. I think to this day, I use something called Last FM, and to this day, Walking with a Ghost is still one of my top listened to songs. So I am a very big fan. I want to jump right in because I feel like my questions are going to go by quickly, and there are going to be millions of other people who want to ask questions to the two of you. Judy mentioned 9 albums, millions of records sold. That requires a lot of vulnerability, more than most people are willing to kind of come to terms with. You decided that wasn't enough vulnerability. You decided to write about what for most people is the scariest and most transformative parts of their lives. What motivated you to take on such a scary, scary thing? And how did it feel? What was the difference between that and recording some of your albums?
I don't know if there were that many differences between writing a record and writing a book. I mean, there are some, undeniable, very significant differences. Like one is writing music and one is writing a book. But Sara and I do the majority of our writing of music on a computer. We use a program called Logic, and we program a lot of music that way. So I actually do sit at the computer a lot when I'm working on music. So there was a lot of things that were similar. The way that I break out a song, I sort of broke out a chapter. The way that I sort of want to tell a specific kind of story on a record or through a song, through lyrics, I found myself using a lot of those same muscles and skill sets writing the book. I think really the only big distinct difference was that you can hide a lot in music using lyrics, but what I found really overwhelming once we really got into the writing of the book was just how there's no way to really hide when you're writing a memoir. You're writing in your own words. It was and it wasn't Tegan and Sara. Each chapter in the book is told by one or the other of us. So through these alternating chapters, you get 2 very distinct versions of the story of our high school life, and the first spark that made us want to write music, and our first couple years dealing with our sexuality, all of that stuff. And that's all been in our music, but it's not that clear. It's not that obvious. Music's supposed to be universal. But I think that as soon as we started writing the book, I was like, wow, this is just about us. This is just us. And it was really revealing. But I think that that's our job. So I didn't find it uncomfortable. I found it really thrilling to find a new way to reveal who we are and to hopefully provide a story that people will relate to.
Oh, I love that. Sara, did you feel the same way?
No, it was the complete opposite. Just kidding. I don't know. No, I mean, a lot of that is really true. I mean, I think that one of the things that was really interesting for me when I think about myself as an artist, I really think of myself as having different kinds of instruments. Like I'm a singer, and I use my lyrics to tell stories. And like Tegan mentioned, I use a computer as my sort of way of translating all of that into something that I then share with other people. And so much of that experience was the same with writing the book. The difference is that it's easier to come, at the end of a day to say to like my girlfriend or to Tegan or whoever to say, hey, do you have 3 minutes to listen to this song I've been working on, is very different than saying, would you mind reading through unedited, like 5,800 words about my feelings about 1996 and the first time I heard Smashing Pumpkins Tonight. Like, I just think like there's a very There's just something more exciting about playing a song for someone, and you can sort of be in the experience of listening with that person. Whereas this is much more personal and private, and it required a lot more patience. I couldn't get that immediate feedback that I sometimes desire as an artist. So I found the book really satisfying, but it was also really challenging to write.
It is so fun. I feel like you must like have reviewed my notes. I think you may have, because literally my next question is about Smashing Pumpkins.
Oh,
Yes, 100%. Because
wow.
one thing I was clocking as I was reading your book, and I don't know if other people felt this way, but you kind of gave a little bit of blueprints to kind of like make a mixtape as to what kind of informed your Tegan and Sara high school experience. And Smashing Pumpkins, actually, I'm sure you know this, was the first specific band that you mentioned by name in the book. What was it? I mean, later you would go on to talk about Nirvana and Green Day and Annie DeFranco and a lot of other artists, but Smashing Pumpkins was the first. What kind of drew you specifically to their music? And with what drew you to them, do you incorporate any of that stuff in your own music?
Well, I mean, Smashing Pumpkins, it was easy. I didn't have to think about it. It was truly the gateway into alternative music for me. I had been so interested in what my parents were listening to, and sort of like culturally at school, like kids would be into something and I would be into it. But Smashing Pumpkins sort of felt like I actually had my brain rearranged. It was actually a boy at school who had given me a copy, given Tegan and I a copy of Siamese Dream, and I remember putting it on and listening to the song Today and feeling, like everybody has that first experience, whatever it is. For some people it's music, some people it's love, some people it's horses. I don't know. But I just remember thinking, I want to know everything about what is this? What is this message? What is this sound? What is this feeling that I'm having? I wanted to just live and breathe it. And I became I mean, Tegan loved Smashing Pumpkins as well, but I remember it was the first time in my life that I became devout about something. Like I remember thinking like, I must have all the things. I must have all the information. I need all the magazine. Like Tegan and I had a subscription to Spin Magazine and Rolling Stone. And the decided upon rule was like, if anything was mentioned about Smashing Pumpkins, I was able to cut it out and put it on the wall in my room. And if anything was mentioned about Nirvana, Tegan was allowed to have that and put it in her room. But I just remember being totally fascinated, intoxicated by the sound of Billy Corgan, his voice, his words, the sound of his guitars, the layers, like the sort of like atmosphere of what it was. And it was the first time that I really was able to to recognize that I was discovering something for myself. Like I wasn't having the experience of like my stepdad saying, you got to hear Bruce Springsteen's live, whatever. Like, and I loved that stuff. Like I loved it. But this was my experience. I was the entry point. I was saying, listen to this is my experience and this is my world. And I wanted to just live there all the time. And so it was really fun to write about. And actually, I hadn't listened to a lot of Smashing Pumpkins. I'm a piece of shit. I mean, sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but like, I'm the worst fan. I'm the worst fan. But I hadn't listened to Smashing Pumpkins in a long time. And writing the book I don't know, it did something for me. I listened to it all the time. I was just on a walk yesterday listening to the song Disarm. I swear I listened to it 12 times in a row. I think that song is a masterpiece. And I have this memory of being a young person and loving Siamese Dream, but not liking Disarm because it was popular and being like, that song's too mainstream. I don't want to listen to that song. And now I'm like 40 years old walking through the forest, like weeping, being like, this song is a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Wow, I love it. You made me now want to go back and listen. I haven't listened to
it's so good
in a while.
The good news is they've remastered all their albums. They sound great.
Thank heavens. I was
they
worried.
sound great. I know, me too. I was very worried about the sound quality, but it's actually they've put all these deluxes out, and it's been really fun to get back into Smashing Pumpkins. It's kind of like, when you watch those movies, those fictionalized movies about people who go back to high school and re-fall in love with their high school sweetheart. I feel like I re-fell in love with Smashing Pumpkins over the last couple of years. Like I'm like back in deep.
Oh my gosh.
Mhm.
This feels more like a Dispatching Pumpkins talk. I'm like, let's dive in. Let's dive into that. But one interesting thing I wanted to touch on, and this is a question for both of you. I have a sister. We fought a lot when we were growing up. We never thought that the cure seemingly was just to take acid together. That did not occur to us at the time. It seemed that worked for the two of you. But the other thing that I found particularly crazy about that was not as much that the two of you, that brought you two together, was that you would watch essentially anti-drug message films like Kids and Rush and all these kind of like specific movies that terrify you, and the two of you loved it. What possessed you, number one, I guess, to like use that as a bonding point, and then also to watch the movies that I think sober or under the influence would have scared the daylights out of me?
You sound wimpy. You sound like you're a wimp. You sound like you're a wimp.
100%.
It's funny because we know kids, we know teenagers now, and we have a lot of teenagers in our audience. And since writing our memoir and putting it out in the world, we've had a lot of adults in our age or older, that bracket, all comment a lot about the drugs that are the amount of drug talk that is in our memoir. And, we delight at it. It's why we included it in our story. I think it's an important part of our origin story around creativity and art. I think it did actually loosen us up, specifically because we experimented a lot with LSD. And I do believe that it, has certain, it has an ability to sort of relinquish you from the rules and standard way of thinking and being that, life can have. And the restrictions that we felt as teenagers because of our bodies and our sexuality and where we grew up, I think drugs allowed us to escape. And that, we're really clear that our book is not a manual or an advertisement for drugs. I mean, it was the 90s. It was a different time. We also had each other's back. We had a really cool, eclectic group of friends. We all kind of took care of each other. I don't know if I've said it yet. Drugs were different back then. Like I wouldn't be caught dead buying something like from a guy next to my locker at school. Like, me now would not be.
Let's hope you're not in a high school at 40 years old buying out a teenager. Let's hope.
Yeah. Okay. Like at the Y working out, I'm not going to buy something off someone, in the locker room. But it was so important for us to tell that part of our story when we actually went out to sell our proposal, met with all the big publishers. We were pretty, forthcoming and strong-willed about the fact that we felt drugs were a really significant part of our story. For us, it was a device to tell how we sort of moved, from doing drugs to music. We used, I think, drugs to bond and connect and open our creative pathways. But then I think music was sort of the cure. And then we didn't do drugs anymore. Long before that, though, like we did watch all the movies you're talking about, and they did not terrify us. I think they intrigued us. They definitely had the unintended effect of making us want to experiment. I suppose that's why teenagers try so hard to watch movies they're not supposed to watch. And my mom was horrified by our memoir the first time she read it, because she felt it made her seem like she was an absentee parent, which she wasn't. She was just a single mom who raised her kids while she went back to university twice and worked full time. And so, when she would drop us off at Blockbuster and be like, okay, you can rent 7 movies for $7.99, pick whatever you want. I imagine she figured I imagine she thought there was no way we would possibly get out of the video store with things we shouldn't be watching. And I also think my mom, on another level, trusted us, like to watch those kinds of things and know better. We grew up in a tough neighborhood, and my mom worked with teenagers. And so I think she trusted us and to make mistakes and make bad decisions, but also make good decisions. So I think whether she knew it consciously or not, she knew that we were up to something, but I think she still trusted us enough to not sink. And I think that's missing from a lot of parents these days. I think there's like people are coddling their young people in this way that then they're failing later on in life when you finally do let go. And I really appreciate that my mom let us do our thing. So, but drugs were a really, effective way for Sara and I to connect to each other, connect to our friends, and eventually connect to art. And we didn't want to hide that or mask that or pretend that wasn't a part of our story. I think clearly we're not experimenting with LSD now, but I'm a big fan of where that world is going, that people are starting to really invest and look at the mental health benefits to different drug properties and blah, blah, blah. So, I guess we're trailblazers. I don't know.
I'm fine with that. I like that label. That's a good label. I wanted to touch on, there was a quote. The reason I'm looking down is because I want to get this quote right. There were a lot of quotes that I loved. I'm sure you don't write this way, but like this memoir there were so many quotes I wanted to pull out of it and hold on to. But one of them, Tegan, was from you. You wrote about the first time that you sang in front of people. And the song that you sang was She by Green Day. And the quote that I loved was, you wrote, "As I started to sing, I liked it. I liked the butterflies flapping frantically in my stomach as I managed the notes and the words." That quote really resonated with me. And I was curious, the two of you have been pretty much, in the across the board, spanned everything you could want to do as musicians, it seems like. Do you ever still get those feelings? Do you ever still feel those butterflies?
Yeah, it's funny actually, because when I sang She, that song, I was singing it to a girl over the phone, and then I didn't have a crush on, but she was kind of like maybe half bully, like half popular kind of person. And I don't even know why she called my house, to be honest. I think I remember it being a very confusing thing. But the chapter you're talking about, she gets her brother on the line and she makes me sing for him. And it was definitely my first time performing, but I'd always really enjoyed singing. And Sarah and I had another best friend when we were in elementary school and junior high, and we used to lay and sing, the three of us together. Like, we would lay in our sleeping bags at sleepovers and we would all sing songs. And music was always such a big thing for us, but actually performing didn't happen for a really long time. But there was a lead up to it where we would sing with our friends, or we would take turns singing a song. And even then, like, what I'm trying to get at is, even then I wasn't performing for people, but just singing along to music gave me such a high. And Sarah and I both, some of our earliest memories are imagining ourselves when we were 5 or 6 years old as the singers we were listening to. So when we loved, Groovy Kind of Love by Phil Collins, we didn't imagine when we were 7 years old that we were Tegan or Sarah singing the song. We used to imagine ourselves in Phil Collins' body singing the song. And so I feel like even before we knew what performance was, and even before we knew that musician was a job you could have, or that songwriting was a thing, we were always imagining ourselves holding words and melodies and songs inside of us. And I think that there was a natural instinct to not just sing along, but to sing as if it were us singing it. And so, yeah, that moment where I sing to the girl, I liked it. I liked her compliments. I liked that she thought I had an interesting voice. And that is why I perform still to this day. It's why we've spent 20 years traveling around. It's still, even the worst day, sometimes you get up so early and you drove all night and you feel so crappy and you had such a crap sleep and you have to go to a radio station and they don't even know who you are and they don't care, and we're setting up. But the second we start to play, I'm not like, oh, it was all worth it, but I'm like, I like playing music. Like, it'll be the 3 minutes that didn't feel like absolute misery.
What a payoff for such a buildup. And then you climb a mountain with one shoe, and your friends and family are perishing around you. And I start to sing, and I mean, it's not amazing, but it's not like the worst. It's fine.
Look, I'll say this. Look, this week I threw my back out, and I've been like in like horrible pain. Which I want to say, this is why I keep shuffling around. I can like not really sit still comfortably, so I'm not itching to get out of here. No, it's totally fine. I'm on painkillers, so it's like not horrible, but you just I can't get comfortable, and I don't mean it to imply that I'm not. Josh, you're wonderful. Sarah, you're very interesting. I wanted to know that I am shuffling around, not because something bad's happening, mostly just I'm uncomfortable. But all I meant about the radio station thing is that no matter how bad a day is, and no matter how little payoff or how small an audience, none of that matters, because I still absolutely still sing and get joy or high. Like, there is a high. I mean, it's something you really do. You can be like hungover. It doesn't happen to us very often, but I've been at a show before where I've been hungover, and the second I get on stage, I just feel better. I mean, you're pumping your body full of hormones, adrenaline.
Well, I was about to say, we're very much addicted to, like, we probably overproduce cortisol and adrenaline, and we also now are somewhat stuck in performance because it's one way we can naturally and organically generate a feeling of sort of stasis or like, happiness inside of ourselves. Like, and I think, one of the things though that I was going to say about, the piece that you pull out, like that idea of performing, even just singing someone else's song, I have this memory of always being, we would always get attention because we were twins, like before we had ever done anything. Like, I mean, being a twin is not like an action. It's not something I am good at or bad at or, am in control of. And I think there was also something about performing and singing that gave us a sense of, or at least it gave me a sense of, well, if people are going to pay attention to me, at least they're paying attention to something that I'm doing, not just something that I am. And it sort of felt like a way to control people's attention. It felt like a way to be it, like whether or not we perform or perform well, it's more of like, if I want to be visible, I know how to make myself really visible, even now as an adult. And if I want to be invisible, I'm really good at making myself invisible. And I think that there's something fated about like us becoming performers, because I think just our identity and existence as twins was somewhat of a burden. And I think we had to figure out how to like balance that, and balancing it with this like tremendous skill of being able to turn on and off something that makes people attracted to you or magnetically drawn to you or whatever it is. It goes hand in hand with being an entertainer. We probably could have done something else too. I don't think it's just music that we could have done, but I think finding a way to control that attention that people would give us or not give us was extremely important in our development as artists.
That's incredible. That's real. That's not only very insightful, but also makes me think as well. Kind of about that, taking the action as opposed to being, getting judgment for kind of what you are. I'd be remiss if I didn't briefly touch on my favorite song in the world's probably favorite song, which is Tegan Didn't Go to School Today.
Yeah.
That is
classic.
It's classic. Now, so I'm not an audiobook guy. So I showed you the book earlier. I was reading the book, and out of pure curiosity, I Googled the song to see if it was available. And I'm going to be honest, and I want to preface, like, I think you're both amazing, and I really like your music. But I was like, okay, this is the first song they ever recorded. Like, this is probably not going to be great, right? And then it was like this haunting, like Nirvana-esque vocals about Tegan not going to school. And then it like cuts out towards the very end and goes into this like haunting, sweet, like, I miss you ending, this outro. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, these two have had a prolific career, and this first song is surprisingly good. When you went back and listened, I'm guessing a while must have passed between, like, I'm assuming you didn't revisit it for quite a while. When you listen back, were you surprised where you're like, this is not a bad song?
Yes.
Yeah, because when we started writing the memoir, we didn't have access to the tapes. We had a couple demo tapes, maybe 40 songs or something that we wrote in high school. Neither of us had listened to them at least 15 years, maybe longer. And I actually, once we'd sold the book proposal, we kind of got down into writing, and I went into research mode. And we're still in touch with a lot of people we went to high school with, so it was actually pretty easy. But they had their extended high school network as well. And so, within a month or two, just an avalanche of stuff started to arrive into our world of letters and notes and photos and VHS tapes and these demos, which were so crucial in writing the book, because it was a long time ago and we did do a lot of drugs. So it was really important to have all these references and these, like, I think the book is quite factual because we did, especially like, Sara publicly says that she didn't really use any of it. But for me, I like watched the videos and listened to the music as a way to like trigger my memory and to really allow me to use a certain level of description so you could visualize what it was like for us back then. But the demos absolutely struck me as being really good and much better than I remembered. Some of them are really bad, but some of them were really strong. Some of them had melodies that came back to me in a flash. Some of them had melodies that had stayed with me for 22 years. I think that right from the beginning of our career, we were really good at writing memorable melodies and really interesting lyrics. I think we had a real knack for structure and had grown up listening to so much pop music and punk rock and whatever. Like there was a ton of personality in our early music. The recordings themselves were really rough. So, it inspired us to re-record the songs, and we put out a record called Hey, I'm Just Like You. And they're re-recordings and, a lot of them are patchwork where we like kind of took 2 or 3 songs and turned them into one so we could use as much of it as possible. But it was such a fun project and it made me feel so good. And the thing that felt most important was that I think the early part of our career, we wrote all that music off. We told ourselves that we weren't that good. You know, we got decent reviews and people really liked us, but there was sort of a casual sexism in you know, I mean, it varied. It was like casual sexism and then sometimes just like super blatant misogyny. But like the late 90s and early 2000s weren't awesome for women in music, especially indie rock, especially queer women. And it just always felt like we were being told that, okay, fine, there's something special about them. Okay, there is something interesting. Oh, okay, Neil Young signed them. I guess there's something there. We'll see what they come up with later on when they actually learn how to, you know, write a song. And as much as you fight that, I think we took on this idea that we weren't as good when we started out. We didn't necessarily fight back against that to say, like, out of a bazillion bands that put out records and do stuff, we were getting chosen for really significant things, for big tours with, you know, we had a career, and we kind of just started to take on that narrative that I think a lot of, especially male writers, but there were plenty of women that wrote nasty, miserable stuff about us when we were just kids. And I think we just thought, well, that early stuff was juvenile. It was childish. It wasn't good. And then I listened back to it all and I was like, no, this is really amazing. This is why we're still around 20 years later, is because I think we had a knack for songwriting. I think we had a knack for writing something that would resonate with a billion different kinds of people. And I think we wrote melodies that stick in your head. And we were doing that at 15. And it was really cool to hear the songs and be like, yeah, we're dope.
That's the review that you needed, was just, you're dope. Yeah, I know. Sara was just like, I miss my sister and I'm going to write what is now still to this day, like a very hauntingly moving song.
Thank you, Josh.
Oh my gosh, I'm so serious. And sorry, I know I'm getting off topic, but like I was singing it. I was singing it to myself as I was like typing notes. And my girlfriend walks in, she goes, that's good. What is that? I was like, oh, it's not mine. It's literally Tegan and Sara's. But one thing that was a little tough in reading your book was that I would find myself getting attached to certain people that each of you were dating. And then you would break up and then I would get very sad. You know, there were big moments that, for example, you know, I know, Tegan, you kind of talked about how you felt isolated when Sara and Naomi kind of moved from friendship into a romantic relationship. If I recall correctly, Naomi never wanted to say it was dating, but when it moved into a romantic relationship, and Sara, I know there were similar feelings with you when Tegan started dating Alex. One of the things I think I would have thought naively is that as I was, if I were in those shoes, as I were coming into my own sexual identity and kind of coming to terms with the things I like and the challenges that were going to come with it, I would have thought that having a twin who was also going through something like that might have been helpful. But as I read the book, it seemed like that created even more conflict internally and externally. And I would love to kind of hear more about what the process was of self-discovery when you're kind of competing with your sibling going through the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's, you know, it's not something that I had spent a ton of time thinking about in depth and articulating in the years between our adolescence and coming out and adulthood. And it was really illuminating to certainly to think about it now as an adult. I don't know if I went back into my 17-year-old brain and really like dug deep if I would have had the same understanding or if it would have connected as much as it connects now. But I don't think it's not easy to sum it up, but I will say that one of the main things that I discovered when I went back and started writing about my own terror, like fear about being gay, was that I was keeping it from the people around me, my sister, my mom. In some ways, I was doing that because by telling other people, I would have to be accepting of that fact of myself. Like I would have to accept that about myself. And I just wasn't ready to do that. And I think that is hard for people to understand, that you can be in love and having sex with someone and thinking like, this is amazing. And also be like, but I don't want to think about what it means about my identity or what it means about my future or my safety or what other people would think about me. And then I think at some point when I realized that Tegan was also gay, it scared me. And I think my reaction to her being gay was not like, oh, great, we're both gay. It was, oh God, now I have to worry about what might happen to me and what might happen to Tegan in our future. And I think, you know, at 17, if you had sat me down and said, why are you so afraid to be gay? Or why do you feel so scared to be gay? I wouldn't have known what to tell you. I was 17. I didn't have an understanding or language for that. But I know now as an adult what I felt was ashamed, and I didn't have a future, and I didn't, it was embarrassing to be gay. It was dangerous to be gay. It was a life that I didn't know how to render or imagine for myself. And so the thought that the person I loved the most in the world beside me was also going to face that was devastating. And I think that my reaction to her being queer was also anger, because it made me feel more exposed. If she had been straight and had been like acting straight, which is so funny to think about, because it's like, how can Tegan act straight? She's so gay. But if she had been straight, I would have felt more protected. And so the two of us out in the world, sort of exposed and queer, and Tegan was living a lot, to me, we were both not truly hiding who we were. I would hold hands with my girlfriend in front of my friends. There was a lot of flexibility and teenagery behavior of fooling around, sitting on people's laps, kissing people, it wasn't like people were like, whoa, is Sara and Naomi like getting it on? It was sort of like, yeah, who knows? She's probably getting it on with everybody, whatever. But I felt like Tegan was revealing real emotion and connection and intimacy to her secret girlfriend. And that bothered me, because I was like, yeah, sit on her lap and make out with her and joke around. But if you reveal that this is real, and that this is real intimacy and real connection, you are making it more dangerous for me and for yourself. And that, there was a lot of anger and fear in both being gay. And then also just, for myself, I was exposed and had to come out earlier than Tegan. And I just had the weirdest sensation that I used the wrong name, because all the names in the book are pronouns. And I just was like, oh shit, I shouldn't say Tegan, but it's fine. That's her name. I know, it's so weird. I had this sense that I was exposing Tegan in the book. But anyways, I remember feeling so mad at Tegan when I had to come out, because I also felt like, oh, great. Now, I'm out and I'm dealing with all of this. And she kind of was getting to sort of still be safe in the closet. And then when she came out, everyone was already like, oh yeah, it's fine. Sara came out and did all the hard work. And everybody was kind of ready for Tegan to come out. Everyone was sort of like, okay, Tegan, welcome, thank you for coming out. Whereas for me, it felt like I was just in uncharted territory, and a lot of people got it wrong with me. And so by the time Tegan came out, a lot of people, those same people, got it right with her. And so it just caused all this tension between us.
Oh, wow. Tegan, I would love to hear what you think about that. That's really interesting.
My biggest revelation writing the book about sexuality, well, there were two things kind of tied for top spot. One, I was really struck reading Sara's chapters as they came in, unraveling how much sadness and how much struggle there had been for her around her sexuality. I knew the external parts of it, but to read it in black and white, to really hear in Sara's own voice what her internal experience had been, was really eye-opening for me. I didn't realize how much she'd grappled with it. It just, I didn't know the whole story. We weren't those kinds of sisters. We didn't tell each other everything. We weren't like that. I think probably because we were so similar, there was just a natural instinct to have some space between us. We shared so many friends, we shared so many hobbies and likes and whatever. And there was just almost out of respect, kind of privacy. And our whole house was like that. We had locks on our doors. We were allowed to really carve out space for ourselves as individuals growing up. And so it was really revealing. But the other thing that really struck me as I was writing my side of the book and really diving into my own sexuality was how little thought I gave to my sexuality until I fell for my best friend in 12th grade. You know, I always thought she was cool and I always liked girls. I mean, I definitely thought about it, but I never worried about it. And I liked boys enough. And I think that it was sort of like, you know, it was one of those things.
Imagine that, Josh. Your girlfriend was like, Josh, I like you enough.
What's funny is I don't have to imagine it. She says it.
I mean, look, you know, we were teenagers, right? Like I was getting to hang out with, I had a very cute boyfriend all through high school. We in the book, I only talk about us getting together and breaking up once, but we actually dated all through high school and broke up and got together so many times. And our editors were like, too confusing, not necessary. We get it. You tried to date a guy. He ended up, you know, not being the right guy, but he's still one of my best friends to this day. And he's also gay, which is why I love dating him probably, is because on some level he was safe. But yeah, I liked guys enough. And I had really obsessive, intense, deep relationships with women. And so in a weird way, I was getting everything I needed. And then when I finally got together with my best friend, only because she was aggressive enough to, you know, see what was going on between us, I was thrilled. And me keeping it a secret actually had more to do with just like it feeling very fun and exciting to have a secret from everybody. And once it got dramatic, it sort of ended and whatever. But anyway, the thing that struck me writing that was how the first emotion that came up when I started to write that part of the story was that I had felt, and I hadn't thought of this in 20 years, but when I got together with my first girlfriend, my first and really only fear was that Sara would think I was copying her. And that she would be like, oh, like, you know, because we fought over things. We fought over music. We fought over clothes. We fought over friends and phone time. And, you know, that was that time. And I realized like how, you know, reading through my journals from that time, which all are written to my best friend, who is my secret girlfriend, it's all about feeling judged by Sara and feeling like she's annoyed or mad or frustrated. And, you know, reading Sara's side of the book helped me to reconcile that. Like she felt it was exposing her because I was much more brazen with my best friend. And, you know, there was less fear and hiding for us. So it kind of like the puzzle pieces came together while we were writing. But, you know, that really shook me, where I was like, oh yeah, it was like my first feelings around sexuality were just like, oh, I hope Sara doesn't feel like I'm copying her. Imagine you can just like copy something. You're like, gay looks cool. I'm in.
Yeah. What an extent to copy someone. That's going very far.
Yeah. It's got maybe, I mean, if only it were so easy. Our mom always says if her and her partner break up, if her and this guy break up, that they aren't going to, they love each other very much, but that she's going to date a woman. She's like, I'm gonna be a lesbian. And I'm like, it's not really like that, Mom. It's not quite, you don't just get to like be a lesbian. Have you thought through the things that lesbians do? And so you'll be with a woman. And she's just like, yeah, it's, you know, then she'll name women that she likes that are her friends, or like Kate Blanchett. And I'm like, well, I mean, we'd all be gay for Kate Blanchett, obviously.
100%. 100%. That's so funny. I don't want to get super dark. I want to get like a hint of darkness. In reading the book, and I don't know, and I've watched some interviews with the two of you, I don't know how many people are touching on some of the darker moments in the book. And I have one for each of you. Sara, there were a lot more than that, but we don't have all the time in the world. Sara, there was a chapter you wrote called New Year's Eve. And in that chapter, I mean, a lot of things are happening in that chapter. I mean, there's a cruel prank, there's a car chase, like this, if anyone's looking for an action film in the book, like this is probably the chapter for you. But you talked about a cruel prank that Wendy and Stephanie played on the two of you. That you know, involved someone grabbing at your legs and dragging you up the stairs, which even repeating it does not sound funny now. But what was interesting to me is, I mean, you made a point to include that in the book. So I imagine that stuck with you in a very vivid way. What was it about that experience that has stayed with you today? And I think looking back, how do you reflect on it?
You know, it was one of the first chapters that I wrote for the book. It took place in our last year of high school. And the chapter itself, as you said, is written about New Year's Eve, and the story specifically about that night. It's the chapter talks about New Year's Eve, but I sort of call back to an episode that had happened with some of those same friends earlier that year that had sort of foreshadowed the the New Year's Eve debacle. And that event was a sleepover where a bunch of us had stayed over at one of our friends' houses, and we'd fallen asleep, and she had gone upstairs and was having more drinks with another friend, and a bunch of older guys from the neighborhood who we did not know were sitting outside flirting with them and talking with them, and they eventually go downstairs into the basement where we're all sleeping, and we are awoken to them ripping the blankets off of all of us. There was a bunch of us downstairs, and and then managing to grab a couple of us, including Tegan, and drag these tiny women who are 5 feet tall, these big hockey player guys, dragged us through the basement and up the stairs, and we're laughing, and it was terrifying. And of course I was horrified by the men, but the point of the story was to show how our friendships as women, which had been so supportive and so protective up until that point, it was exposed to me during that time of high school that women would just do things, or would be sort of distorted by their desires to be accepted and to go along with what men wanted them to do. And that was new for me. I hadn't really experienced that. We had sort of been in the sanctuary of this group of friends that didn't follow the rules of heteronormative. Like, even though everyone in the group wasn't queer, there was this kind of like, it was like bros before hoes, like we were all hanging out with each other and going to raves and gigs and parties and sleepovers. And it was one of the first times that I remember thinking, how could you let those guys do that to us just so you would look cool or hot or down or whatever? And it was a really terrifying experience, and it made me feel like I didn't trust the girls in my world as much as I had up until that point. And I think why it felt important to tell that story in the book was because I wanted to call attention to the fact that while I was gay, and I did have some negative experiences with men in a dating way, like just like gross guys, whatever. But I wanted to show that that feeling of power that men had in our lives, and not because I was like a girl dating guys. I wanted to show that men really controlled our world. They were the object of many of my friends' affection. They were my they were my caretakers. My stepdad was the person who really was around and supervising us. It was the teachers at school. It was the police officer at school who was in the hallways. It was the DJs and the bands that we went and saw. Like, men had so much power in our world. And I think I wanted to tell that story to showcase that sort of rude awakening, that even though I was in this kind of utopian, intimate group of friends, men could kind of come in and destroy that with just, what to them was probably just a silly thing. But it's like, 25 years later, I can still remember the terror of like waking up and these guys dragging my sister, through the house. Like, I think to know that acute, visceral feeling of terror is, it's hard to erase that.
Yeah, it really stuck with me. I put the book down and kind of like, walked away and did my thing for a couple days, but it stuck with me.
I think it's hard for men. I don't think men talk about how other men scare them.
All the time.
Think that, men are scared of other men. And I do feel like, I feel like to tell a story about men scaring me in a way that would be normal, like an average story would be like, oh, and this guy, he jeered at me on the street and he followed me home or something. Like, that's a common thing that happens to women. But I wanted to tell a story with a different context, because I didn't think that we were going to be assaulted. I didn't think we were going to be, it wasn't so dark, but it was dark enough that I remember just thinking like, man, this world is just like not what I imagined it,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was funny. I was once walking on the street with someone, and she said to me, she goes, "You see that guy in a hoodie across the street? I have to walk around being scared of him." And I was like, "Oh, don't worry. I'm also terrified." I was like, "Yeah, I'm 100%." I was like, "If you think I can defend you, I punch like a 5-year-old. Can't do it." Tegan, the darker piece for you, I wanted to talk a little bit about your experiences with Tess. Tess, for those that didn't read the book, Tegan talked about how she had a crush on a girl named Tess. Tess was someone who, and please tell me if I'm wrong, I don't think I am, at one point punched someone for changing the stereo station. Yeah. So of all the people that I think that both of you talked about in this book, Tess was probably the scariest of the bunch, and I'm sure she was going through things at the time. But I guess as you in that time in your life are kind of figuring out what you want and who you want, what were some of the things that attracted you to someone who was maybe had a little more of a darker energy or a darker past or a darker present? And by the way, you're on mute.
Great job, Josh. You really spied that. Eagle eyes.
Got it.
Sorry, guys. It's because there was like 14 ambulances and then someone leaf blowing outside the building. I'm like, sun's going down. I'm like melting into the background. It's falling apart here, but you two look great. Yeah, I really wanted to write about Tess because, again, we were quite strategic about what ended up making it into the book. And when I say we, I mean us and our editors, who were both just absolutely incredible. Sara and I wrote like what felt like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pages, and every time we'd hand in a draft, we'd cut half of it and be like, okay, this is the story, and then we would be like, okay, and then we'd go back and draft 2, and it would be like like War and Peace, we'd hand back in, and they were like, these are fascinating stories, this is incredible, this is the story, and cut it. But I really pushed for our time with Tess, and some of the other peripheral characters that sort of revolved around her, because I think that was another really significant device to tell our story, which is that I think Sara and I stood at a point near the end of grade 10 and at the beginning of grade 11 at the precipice of a massive change, or a decision. And our life would have changed dramatically if we'd gone that other route. We grew up in a very loving household and had a lot of extended family who, were upper middle class. Our grandparents were farmers who had retired and made lots of money, but my mom insisted on paying for her own schooling. And, her and my dad were very young when they had us. They were 21. And so we didn't grow up with a lot initially. And so we grew up in rough neighborhoods. We went to really interesting schools where there was lots of violence and gangs and drugs. And, we got quite an education very young. And I think that part of that felt normal to us and felt like home. And then, but then on the weekends we go to our grandparents' house and they were loving and caring and had a big house. And I think we had these two choices. We were watching our mom go back to school, suffering in a way because she had chosen not to go to university. But, then we also were like experimenting with drugs and skipping classes. And so there was a tug of war in the book to show that we really were struggling with, like, were we going to choose this path that my mom and my parents and my family worked so hard to provide for us? Or were we going to be sort of pushed on this other path where a lot of our friends and the people in our neighborhood were going, which was not good. And Tess was, I think, an example of that. She was someone who had an enormous amount of potential, who unfortunately didn't have the family support or the structure around her. She was had been expelled from school, and she was tough. She was a tough girl, and she had a lot of bad things happen around her and to her. But there was something very appealing about her. She was extremely charismatic and smart and articulate and a massive reader, and she adored Sara and I. And I think we'd always wanted an older sibling, and I think in a way maybe she represented that. But she was also a huge fan of our band when we started it, and I think, she just felt like an important person to include in the book, because I think she, for me, was the beginning of me choosing the other path. She was the beginning of me being like, I write about it in the book in a later chapter, where I realized we couldn't be doing drugs and going on these crazy adventures and lying to my mom anymore, that I wanted music, and I'd fallen in love with my best friend, and she provided me with a more secure path. And it was actually a really hard section of the book for me to write, because I at times it made me feel like a shitty person, because I was trying to find a way to vocalize what I thought as a teenager, which was that I, at some point, was like, I feel better than that life. I don't want to party and hang out. I don't want to end up in this gross house, this flop house with all these old guys with young girls hanging out. Like I had to find a way to vocalize that I saw a certain kind of life for us if we didn't clean up our act. So it felt really important, but not all my memories of her are traumatizing. A lot of them are really funny. She was a very good time. She was she was like an incredible character, and she really did enjoy our band.
I like that.
Yeah.
I want to get to one last question because I think we've got some good Q&A. So I'm going to throw it back to Judy in a minute, but I wanted to ask one last question because I would be remiss if I didn't mention the foundation, which I think is incredibly important. In the book, you wrote about how you were musicians, and when you started working with an engineer, I believe his name was Jared, if my memory serves. But when you started working with Jared, you talked about how you became businesswomen and, musicians and businesswomen. You kind of talked about how like you made that switch. I feel like with the foundation, you're adding on grant writing, funding. You've taken it to a whole other step. I guess I would love to not only kind of let the audience hear more about the foundation in itself and what drove you to start it, but I'd also love to understand from the two of you. I mean, this is learning as far as I'm sitting, a brand new language, a brand new skill set. What was the transition into kind of, heading up the foundation?
We always were coming up with ways to raise money for things that we cared about, and it was more grassroots, and it was often sort of identifying, oh, this issue is on the, is in the public consciousness, or this is what's being spoken about at our shows or in our community. So we should raise some money and we should donate that money. And that was kind of like that was our approach for most of our career. And a handful of years ago, we were approached about the idea of formalizing that sort of tendency to want to redistribute funds into communities, and be more strategic instead of just always addressing a need. It was sort of looking more systemically and institutionally at what is going on in our community, the queer community, specifically centering women and girls in that conversation. Thinking about ways that we could be both, sort of strategic and think long term, and then also be a sort of force of good when something like a pandemic happens, and we see disproportionate members of our community being impacted. Holy smokes, let's write some grants and let's get them out the door tomorrow, and let's get the funding and the resources needed to those people in the community. So it's a long time coming. It wasn't sort of like a light bulb moment or anything like that. It was really just sort of like a sort of long journey toward making sure that everything that we do and all the work that we do creatively or socially or whatever it is, that we are always sort of centering, our community and our access to funds and our access to power, and making sure that we're redistributing that where we can, in every situation. So, it started really simply, and most bands I think are aware of this kind of strategy now, but, just taking $1 from every concert ticket and just saying, whether you're funneling that to dolphins, or you're funneling that to medical research, or you're funneling that to, awesome queer communities around North America. I think just being able to say, hey, this is something that we can carve out of, our touring business, and make sure that this is always going back to something that we care about. And that has branched into, building programs, working with, communities to develop, funding strategies, going to our corporate partners in the music business and saying, hey, if you don't want to write us a check, give us 5 guitars and we'll auction them off and we'll donate the money. Those types of sort of strategies now have kind of branched out into our business relationships, and it's allowed us to raise, over $1 million for LGBTQ organizations and funding in a lot of different kinds of ways. But it's really it's a significant part of the way we think about our career. Every time we do something, I'm thinking, how do we tie in this to the foundation, and how do we make sure that we're able to take our good fortune and our hard work and redistribute that back into this community that we absolutely love every day.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. And right before I throw it to Judy, just really quick, is there a way that anyone in the audience can help contribute to the foundation?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
follow the Tegan and Sara Foundation socials or go to the teganandsarafoundation.org website. You can sign up for a daily, you could sign up for a daily donation or a monthly donation, like most people.
Whoa, Tegan. I mean, come on, don't do the hard sell.
You hear this from a lot of organizations, but monthly donations are actually almost our preferred because it allows us to look at the year and figure out, let our partners and let our, grantees know in advance that we're going to be able to fund them. We do a lot of, funding for summer camps and those kinds of things. So it's really great. So, we'd love it if people continue to donate to the foundation. We've really, really been incredibly, profoundly moved by how much people care about our community. It's just a matter of getting the money there. Women's organizations get half of what men's organizations do. And then when you start to really drill down into that and look at, trans organizations or organizations that center women or women of color, the numbers are dismal. We're under-researched, we're underrepresented. So we just hope people will trust us to funnel the money places and donate. But we also have an amazing resource list on our website of all the organizations we give to. And if one in particular resonates with you, we just always encourage people to give. I know for us, it's brought us a lot of, purpose in our life to commit to this. It feels good to give back. So
I love it. Well, thank you so much for all of it. And with that being said, I want to bring Judy back in. There she
Thanks,
is.
Josh.
Cool. All right.
Judy.
So the first question, hey guys, how's it going? So the first question is from Florence, and she asks, in your acknowledgments, you talk about how you knew it was the right time to write the book, and that by writing the book, it actually helped you find your passion for music again. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, how did it renew your passion for music, and what do you see is coming next for your careers?
I like this question, Florence. I talked a little bit about this earlier, that we found the demos from our first band while we were writing the book. And that was really the first spark, because we had decided we wanted to write the book to not do music. We were like, okay, we got off the road. We just spent a year and a half, 2 years on the road with this record called Love You to Death. We were like, let's write a book and then we don't have to tour. And then the second we started writing the book, we found those songs. And I'm like, we should make a record and it'll come out at the same time as the book and we'll put both out. So it was very organic. It inspired me to hear the songs. It inspired me and it made me think that it was a worthwhile thing to create. At the time, I was very resistant to this, but everyone at the label and our management were calling it a companion to the book. But for me, I just really felt that the songs deserved to be heard. I felt young Tegan and Sara deserved justice, for all those early reviews that made it seem like we hadn't figured it out. I think we'd figured it out. And I really wanted that to come out. And that really lit a fire in me and made me think that there was still a lot for us to do musically. And actually, it just made me think it was a great moment, instead of writing new music, to apply ourselves to old music to finish that chapter. And I feel like now the world's our oyster. I feel like we can do any kind of record we want. And I'm really excited to see what comes out next.
Cool. Do we have time for one more question?
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
Great. Awesome. So this question is, I would love to understand where you both find your inspiration during these strange times. Life experiences are so different now, and finding creative motivation seems a tad hard. Is it just me, or is it all of us?
I don't want ever to feel like I have found this time extremely creatively satisfying, but that has something so specific to do with our schedule. We're so overscheduled, and Tegan and I spend so much of our life finding a window here or a window there where we can be creative. And I say that from a place of humility. It's nice to be busy and it's nice to have a schedule that is full and opportunities to travel places and play shows and meet people. But this last year has meant a tremendous amount of time at home. And I think that as an artist, at least my own artistry, it needs time to bloom. It needs time to, to grow and change and think. And I had sort of almost neglected that, like forgotten that's a significant part of what really makes me tick as a writer and as a musician and an artist. And so I've actually really found inspiration in just having time and space. You know, I'm not writing songs about the pandemic or like what it feels like not to hug people. I don't care about not hugging people, but you know, I mean, I'm sure there's some trickle down effect of being sort of like separate from people that allows me to think about relationships and think about my feelings, you know, in life and that sort of thing. And that's very inspiring. A lot of the projects Tegan and I are working on right now are totally fiction. And so that's really interesting, like to be in such a strange time where you can't really be out in the world experiencing things, and then to be forced to kind of think creatively and write fiction has really gelled well for me. Like I'm not I just making it up. You know, usually I'm sitting down going like, what did I really feel about this experience? What were my, you know, what were the you know, what were the circumstances or whatever it is? Like I get to sit down right now and make up whatever I want and make up the world and the characters and their feelings. And obviously you're always sort of like using your own life experience to color that. But it's been like this wonderful thing. And the only advice I can give is that I often find that if I'm feeling stuck or that I'm not feeling inspired, then I'm doing the wrong thing. And I know that sometimes goes against what like lots of really fantastic artists and teachers will tell you. Like it's in the weeds and the hard work that you find something good. But if you're really struggling, I mean, it should be a good struggle, like the way it feels when you're like running a marathon or something. Like you should still feel like it's hard. But if you're really stuck, I always think get up and do something different or try something completely opposite. Like that is what stucks me. I'm a writer. I don't know if you know.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
No songs about the pandemic, so I guess we're not going to hear a sequel. Tegan didn't go outside today.
Tegan goes outside all the time, but it's hard to fit masks in. I'm sure we'll write about. I mean, there's stuff in there. You know, there's stuff.
Well, it's still inspired
you know,
by the pandemic. I mean, the reality is that, as Sara said, we have time for the first time ever, so there's time to reflect. And I think that reflection time on our lives, all of us are doing this. You don't have to be an artist. I think we're all reflecting on choices we've made, where we spend money, what we'll do when the pandemic ends, what we miss, what we don't miss. Like, I think a lot of us want to make changes to our life. I know for me, there's things that I did before the pandemic that I'm like, did I need to do that? Like, did I need to go out that much? Did I need to, you know, there are going to be changes. And I think that will influence our music and it will influence the creative projects that we focus on. And I'd agree with Sara that I think it's less words of inspiration, but I would just say that you either feel like being creative or you don't. I've never been the person that's like pressures myself into it, but a schedule for me is everything. I sit down every day after, you know, I have my whole morning routine, but I sit down at 9 and I just kind of tell myself between 9 and 4 that I should try to be creative. That doesn't mean I am during that entire period. I get up, I do laundry, I move around, I definitely create distractions for myself, but I think in my head, 9 to 4 is when I am supposed to be doing this job. And sometimes I'm extremely creative during that time and other times not, but it's like my body knows that this is when I'm supposed to do it. And I tend to find that provides me with better results. So schedule it, put it on the calendar.
I love that.
Love it. And on that note, a huge thank you to both of you for spending the time talking to us today. I hope everyone goes out to read the book. It just came out in paperback. It's also available in hardcover, ebook, audiobook, what have you. And please, please, please donate to the Tegan and Sara Foundation at teganandsarafoundation.org, or you can Google Tegan and Sara Foundation. Thank you both again so much.
Thank you so much to you guys for having us. Thank you for letting us talk about the foundation. Thanks to everyone watching. Happy holidays to everybody. Yay.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks, Josh.